everybody, my name is Kathy Merkel-Roddy. Welcome to Revealing the Healing. We're going to get into it today about trauma. I know that's kind of a hot button subject to talk about, and rightly so, because first of all of us have experienced trauma in our lives. You just can't escape it when you're on earth. That it is one of those things that it's a given that you're going to experience trauma at some point. So I'm going to talk about the different implications and the different things that happen to us as a result of the trauma. And then I'm going to talk about how we can start to heal ourselves from it and move into a new way of being than we've been from the aftermath of the trauma. So I guess I should start with, sometimes there's a physical thing that happens to us, as well as, of course, we know the emotional toll it takes, but it has sort of, and then it also has implications on our soul and our who we are as an entity. So the first thing I want to talk about is oftentimes when we experience trauma, and I've talked about this before in some of my other videos as well, our brain actually undergoes some damage. If we don't have enough glucose in our brain at the moment when this trauma occurs, then it is quite likely that some of our neurons and our neurotransmitters get burned and scorched by the intense heat of the trauma, of the emotional impact of the trauma. When our brain undergoes a traumatic event, our neurons and our neurotransmitters can get scorched by the intense heat. And if there's not enough glucose in the brain to cool the brain down during this event, then there is a pathway that can get scorched. So when that occurs, then there's a damaged neural pathway, and there can be a sort of a default setting that happens over and over again when you get into this fear loop that is very much like experiencing the trauma again over and over again, or just the feelings that came from the trauma. So we almost get like an OCD about thinking about the aftermath of that, or some of the resulting thoughts and beliefs that developed because of the trauma. So in order to heal that, of course, we have to start working on our brain from a more physical point of view and begin to offer plenty of glucose and minerals all the time to our brain so that it can function properly. And then also offering our body in general all the great building blocks that it needs in order to repair the nerves and the brain tissue that got damaged. So what are those things? Those things are fruits and vegetables, and just lots of clean food, The thing is, we want to avoid the foods that actually we know damage the brain. So those foods are more like, MSG and alcohol and caffeine and aspartame. So all of those types of foods actually are known to damage the brain cells. And so we want to avoid those things at all costs as we're trying to heal this trauma. So when the trauma happens, we have several facets of our personality. And you guys, I know you've heard of multiple personality disorder. Well, we all have that to a lesser degree, not such a degree where we forget who, one of our personas is, and then we fully go into the next one. But like on a small scale, that kind of happens to all of us all the time. We all have different personas, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I am a doggy owner, haha. Bogey has to make an appearance in all of my videos. Anyway, and then oftentimes the dominant personas that are actually a part of our personality often become the dominant because they help us through a trauma or a particularly rough time. So I'll give you an example for me. So I had kind of a chaotic childhood, not super hideous or anything like that, but we moved around a lot. There was a lot of instability with that and some financial issues. I also had a father who was very unable to regulate his own emotions and his own nervous system, and he also had very little tolerance for the full spectrum of emotions from his children. So we were forced to kind of mind our P's and Q's and walk on eggshells a little bit, which meant for a kind of a dicey, like, what's it going to be like today kind of situation. So, and you know, that's a kind of trauma too. Sometimes we think of trauma as these big dramatic events that happen that are quite upsetting, but sometimes it can be just around a very emotionally unregulated person for a long period of time that can over time become the same impact as a trauma. So that was kind of my situation, and out of all of that came a persona in me called, what I've named Captain Kathy, because you know, I just had to control all aspects that I could. And that's kind of a common trauma response, actually, when you're feeling out of control and you're feeling like off balance. You just try to overcompensate by controlling others, all the people around you, all the things around you as much as you can. So that became sort of like my go-to thing. My siblings used to sing that Janet Jackson song to me, Control, every time I would, you know, exert my need to control. So anyway, these personas also have other like things that come along with them. They have things like the belief system that you also made or developed, I should say, during that traumatic event. So, you know, if you perceive the world as an unsafe place, then you are going to have a whole set of rules that come with that set of that belief that also came with the persona. So we have this like kind of chain reaction that happens. We develop this persona, I must control everything to stay safe. Then we have this belief because the world is not safe. And then we have these rules. So I've got to do this, that, the other thing. I can't get too close to people. I've got to be very distrusting of people. I've got to, you can get the gist of what I'm trying to say. So in order to start changing or altering or elevating these things, we have to first of all notice them. So that is the first job one, is to note, what persona am I slipping into right now? And that happens often, especially if we have something that triggers us, we're sent immediately into that persona. So we got to notice. And then once we notice, then we can start kind of unpacking it. A lot of this stuff just takes a lot of self-discovery and a lot of time just spent journaling or, you know, writing some things down that you are becoming aware of. Because as we work through this stuff and try and elevate it, we have to do it very consciously and very intentionally. So setting intentions for how we want to be. If we don't want to be anxious all day, how do we want to be? We want to be calm. We want to be peaceful, joyful, energetic. So those would be some adjectives that you could use to replace the anxious, fearful, low energy. Of course you're low energy. If you're always, all your energy is going into being fearful all day, no wonder you have no energy to do anything else. So noticing it is the first step. And then when we notice it, we can also identify the fact that that persona is going to have a set of lenses that we're seeing the world through. When we're in that persona, we see the world in that way. So when I have my Captain Kathy goggles on, I'm not seeing things as they really are. I'm probably seeing them worse than they are. I'm probably seeing situations, taking it personally when it doesn't need to be, when it has nothing to do with me. I'm probably interpreting things in a very fearful manner. So one of the things that we can experiment with, and I find this very helpful, when you identify you're in a persona, then you can just kind of take those goggles off and put on some new ones, and put on your God goggles, and imagine that you are God looking down on the situation, whatever it is, and what would he think? What would God, he or she, however you want to say it, I really don't think God has a gender, but anyway, what would God think? God would think, he would see both sides of the story. He would understand that both parties in the situation are wounded, and hurt people, and maybe we can see it just from a slightly different way. This also helps as we move down the line in this process, because if your trauma has other people involved and you have a lot of anger and hurt and resentment towards them, of course that needs to be dealt with as well. And one of the pathways to get there is to start seeing it from a different perspective. I'm not saying that we have to forgive and forget and move right along, because again, that's probably too big of a leap if you're not ready yet to do that and you haven't gotten to that point. But just seeing it from a possibility that whoever else is involved had perhaps some good intentions underneath it all, or was so wounded. Anyway, I can't speak to individual traumas and why they happened. I'm just trying to kind of generalize this. This is a very lengthy subject and very in-depth. So I'm just touching on the tip of the iceberg here. So forgive me if I'm not going deep into a lot of this stuff, but honestly, I don't think you need to go deep into re-experiencing trauma anyway. I don't think that's helpful at all. I think that you need to just look at yourself in the aftermath and pick up the pieces and look and examine who are the personas, what are the behaviors associated with that persona, and examine if that's serving you. Is that keeping you in an adrenaline loop? Is that keeping you in a fearful state? Because if that is the case, then chances are your health has suffered, the quality of your life has suffered, your relationships have suffered. All of it is a trickle-down effect from this trauma that occurred. And the personas, the beliefs, the rules that came into being because of this persona, then we can start elevating and saying, okay, no, I don't want to be an anxious person anymore. So consciously, my nervous system doesn't know this yet, and my nervous system is still acting like I'm scared and I'm fearful and I'm anxiety ridden all the time. But we have to start gradually making a little bit of a shift. 1% change every day. It's not a big jump. It's tiny, tiny little changes along the way that eventually get us down the road. So as Captain Kathy, let's just say, I have that need to control. And so when I'm in that persona, I can just say to myself, okay, Captain Kathy, you can take a break right now. You don't have to be on duty. Thank you for your service. You helped me through some chaos in my childhood. You've helped me through chaos in my adulthood, let's face it. But another persona is able to be more in control right now. Other persona that needs to step forward in this situation is the one that can be calm and trust that the universe has my back, and the one that can allow for mistakes to happen. It's not an earth-shattering event if I make a mistake or the other person that I'm with makes a mistake, it isn't the end of the world and the way Captain Kathy would have me treat it. So the new elevated, mellow Kathy can be like, go with the flow. Like, it's not how I would do it, whatever the situation is, but maybe you can allow for a new possibility, a new way of trying something, and allowing it to just unfold and not know the outcome, not know the exact route. So sometimes we miss a lot of fun things, and if we miss spontaneity, we miss just the joy and the ease of going with the flow and letting things take us where they want to take us. So sometimes there is some beauty in allowing those other possibilities. So as we learn to kind of do that and shift the beliefs that, maybe how about instead of, the world is not a safe place, how about shifting that belief into most people are good people meaning well, instead of everyone's a villain. And it's probably a stretch to get to everyone is good. That's not necessarily even true, but the majority of people are good. And so let's just go with that as a potential belief, an elevated belief from, the world is not safe, people can't be trusted. So as we learn to shift our personas into more of an elevated, and the most elevated of all is if we can get to our true self instead of relying on personas, because our true self and our soul's desire is in there. It's just a matter of learning to get in touch with that. And that brings me to another portion of this whole thing, is that our soul gets damaged. Our soul leaves pieces of it behind when we're in a traumatic situation. Did you know that when we are in a traumatic, upsetting situation, the majority of our soul leaves our body and is actually above our body when that's happening? It's sort of a safety mechanism to prevent the soul from getting fully damaged. And so when that occurs, though, oftentimes we can leave behind soul fragments. And so no wonder we are not able to come back and regulate our nervous system and return to a normal functioning, because we're not all together. And our soul is actually not fully back in our bodies. So we need that soul in our bodies to give us our life force, to give us our chi, to help us navigate through life. And when we're in a fight or flight situation where our soul had left our body and it has not fully come back into our body, it's very hard to make any headway with our healing because our nervous system can't fully calm down. So there are some meditations that you can do to kind of call back your soul fragments back to you. One of my favorite ones that I like to do is I just like to imagine that I have a big magnet in the middle of my brain, and that magnet is drawing back all of the pieces of my soul and of me that I have left behind in different situations back to me. I'm calling back my power. I'm calling back all of the pieces that I left behind. And as in doing so, you can feel kind of like a shift in your energy. You can feel, okay, I'm feeling stronger, calmer, better. And Medical Medium has a really good meditation called the stargazing meditation that is along the same lines. You basically, you in this meditation, you go up and visit the portion of your soul. Well, there's my cat. Hi, Luna. The portion of your soul that is up above the stars, and that is there to keep you safe from your soul enduring horrific damage through the traumas that we have to endure on Earth. So, hi, Luna. I hear you. She's a singer. She likes to be a part of this too. I should have a pet podcast, really, honestly, because my dog and my cat participate in every video. Could you tell that they like to be near the mama? So we've talked about the brain that gets damaged, and we've talked about the personas. We've talked about the soul damage. You know what we haven't talked about yet is our nervous system regulation. So as we are addressing all of these different aspects of trauma and the effects on us, mind, body, spirit, we have to learn to kind of do a workaround with our nervous system. Because of the fact that we have experienced trauma and we're caught in a loop, and there's some other factors that can weigh into this as well, which are toxins in our environment and in our bodies and pathogens and that sort of thing as well, also contribute to all of this, like feeling of a nervous system that's not regulated. So we have some manual tools that we can use to kind of do a workaround on our nervous system. They're super easy things, and I know you guys probably know all of these I'm going to say, but I also bet you're not doing any of them. Or if you are, you're not doing that many, or you're not doing them often enough. So that's the thing. We have to just remember to do these regularly and make them part of our daily routine so that we can do an override, keep our nervous system as calm as possible in the moments that we have the presence of mind to do it. Because there's going to be things that happen and come up, and then we're going to forget, and we're going to like go off the deep end for a second, and we're going to lose our mind and almost get triggered and step into a persona. But if we can just, in the in-between times when we're not getting triggered, we can remember to do some of these things too, just as a preemptive thing, so that we're more used to being in the calm state, no matter what happens. If we're used to being calm, then our default becomes calm. So just things like, you can just put your hands on your heart for a minute and just feel that. Feel you come into your heart space. And then just use the breath to regulate your nervous system. One of my favorite things, and it's so easy, is just to do some box breaths. You just breathe in for a count of 4, 3 or 4, depending on how slow of a breather you are naturally. But you just breathe in for 3, hold for 3, release for 3, and hold the release for 3. You can do the meditations like we were talking about earlier, the meditations. You can just even lie down, like mid-afternoon. A medical medium calls this the resting the nerves meditation. So it's just a chance to shut off our nervous system for a second. Let it just come down to a calmer state so that we're not in a constantly agitated, adrenalized state. If we can just take a moment to do that. So 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you have. If you're sitting at your desk at work, just close your eyes and sit there for a short period of time, a few minutes. Anything is better than nothing. So those are some things. Of course, there's tapping. There is nature therapy. You can just get outside. There's earthing. You can put your bare feet on the grass and get in sync with the Mother Nature's frequency. Those are all like workarounds. And if you can incorporate as many of those into your day as you can, as often as possible, that also is going to help you heal. Because as we heal the brain from the scorching, we heal the adrenal glands from the adrenaline that's running. Whenever we're having those fearful thoughts or those fearful states, our adrenal glands go haywire and they get fatigued. I'm sure many of you guys have experienced adrenal fatigue. So when that happens, then they start not working quite right and they start misfiring. And then when that happens, then sometimes they become the dysfunctional thing in the body that's then prompting the brain to follow suit. So when the adrenals are just releasing adrenaline for no reason, the brain's like, oh, I better think some thoughts that match this negative energy state and match my thoughts to what I'm feeling with this adrenaline pumping through. So it becomes this like weird thing where at first it's the thoughts triggering the adrenals, but then in some weird way, then the adrenals start triggering the thoughts, and it becomes this vicious cycle. So we need to start breaking that as much as possible, because obviously it's impossible to heal when that's transpiring all the time. And we want to move into a different state. We want to be different. We're going to change our health situation for the better. We're going to change our feelings about ourselves, about life. This whole thing is an entire work, like it's a renovation from top to bottom of who we are, and getting back to the real essence of who we are, not all the accoutrement that we have accumulated over the years. So, I had mentioned earlier not to eat and drink the things that are detrimental to us, and we got to just keep ourselves supported nutritionally as we make all of these changes with our thoughts and evaluating our new way of being. So I hope that this helps. The trauma is one of those things that we all have experienced. We all have it in common, and the worse the traumas are and the more frequent they are, probably the worse health conditions that come along with that. And it's funny because my own health journey is what got me looking at all of this. I would never probably have done such a deep dive if I hadn't experienced a complete health crisis myself. So I'm hoping that maybe this is catching you before you have your own personal health crisis, because I don't wish that for anyone. And I think that we can all improve our state of health and well-being no matter where we are on the trajectory. So if you have a mind to continue delving into this subject with me, I have a blog on my website you guys can check out. I'll put the link below. And then also I have another YouTube video about rewiring the brain, which we sort of touched on with that persona and all of those things. But if you want to go deeper into that idea, which helps recover from trauma, PTSD, and anxiety, I also have a YouTube video called Kicking Anxiety to the Curb. So I'll put the link for that one too. And you guys can, check it out and see what you think. Anyway, it's so good to hang out with you today. I appreciate you spending the time with me, and I hope this was helpful. And we'll look forward to next time. Love you lots. And remember, you just need to do 1% better today than you did yesterday. We're looking for little changes over a long period of time. You can do it. I know you can. Bogey, why? Why must you always be in the star attraction of my videos?